Hello and welcome everyone to our third iteration of our mini series of podcasts we've been doing at Newman Students Union. For this podcast, we are talking about the topic of COVID, the impact. So we're going to be looking at how COVID-19 has impacted students from the perspective of students, and we also have some staff members from the university here to give their perspectives too. So what I'm going to do before we kind of start discussing big elephant in the room, I suppose, is just go around my Zoom call and just kind of call people out to introduce themselves. So just who you are and what course you study or what job do you do within the institution. And we'll start with Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm a STAR and a course rep in primary education.
Thank you. We'll next go to Sian.
Hello, I'm Sian Howarth and I'm the Director of Student Services.
Thank you, Sian. Then go to Alex.
Hi, I am Alex. I'm studying working with young people, children and families, and I'm on a couple of society committees, chair of Christian Union, and I'm also the chair of Student Forum this year.
Thank you, Alex. Sarah?
Hello, I'm Sarah Parks. I teach on the foundation year postgraduate certificate in HE, and I contribute to the work of the Department for Learning, Teaching and Scholarship around activity that supports student transition, retention and success.
Wonderful, thank you. And finally, Scott.
Hello, I'm Scott. I'm a second year computer science student. I do the events and social for Gaming Society.
Thank you. Realise for those listening, if you can see, you'll see on our Zooms that you'll see our names, but I haven't introduced myself. My name is Chris. I'm the president of NSU and I'm hosting our podcast. So the first question that I have for us to kind of talk about is, what impact has COVID had on you personally with regards to your studies or work? I'm just going to open to the floor for anyone to kind of jump in.
I don't mind talking. We all know I can talk for England, so.
Go for it, Alex.
COVID has had quite a big impact. Like, I'm a very sociable person. Everyone can always find me somewhere in the atrium on campus, just sitting and chatting to whoever will give me the time of day. So for me, I think COVID has been incredibly isolating. And I think it's been harder to engage with lectures, which has definitely had a knock-on effect with studies, because we're not getting that kind of back and forth with other students and with lecturers in the room anymore, because obviously we're not necessarily all present. So I think it's had quite a big impact for me personally when it kind of concerns my studies.
Brilliant, thank you, Alex. Did anyone else want to comment?
I'd definitely agree with that. I've missed the physical conversations one-on-one with people. I'd say I have kind of enjoyed being like at home because it saved like travel time. Like, it's been so easy to jump from meetings to meetings. But unfortunately, I've lost my job due to COVID back in March last year. So I had like a decent bit of money coming in, and now that I've lost that, it's been a bit of a struggle, especially paying to run a car and stuff like that.
It's also just the whole.
Sorry,
You've been left unfocused during the whole process. You have too much free time. It's honestly boring, and there's nothing to really do in between lectures. And if you're not a part of society or anything, you don't really have anyone to talk to, and it's draining on the mental health.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, just to say, from my point of view as a member of staff, I really miss the physicality of people and the campus, and just like being able to get up and out my desk, or when I finish teaching or whatever, and I have a wander around and you bump into people who you haven't seen for ages. Just that kind of sense of community, I guess I've really missed. And I agree with what you've been saying in terms of sort of mental health and being able to try and concentrate is very, very difficult. I'm currently trying to get my doctorate in education completed, and I feel I'm finding it really, really difficult to concentrate for any length of time on that, particularly because my study space that I got at home, which my husband had lovingly created for me, has now been my workspace. And the last thing I want to do after I've done Monday to Friday on screen is come here at the weekends and study. So I've found it really, really challenging. And I think going back to what Alex said to start with, that kind of challenge of trying to not replicate what you do on campus with students, but just trying to create activities that are going to have the same kind of effect in terms of trying to get people talking to each other. That for me has taxed me quite. It took up a lot of time of thinking. Yeah, I found that quite challenging.
Okay, I would echo what Sarah said. I really miss the kind of incidental conversations and bumping into people, and that real sense of connectedness and the community at Newman, I think, and not seeing students actually. You know, that's why we all come into this kind of work, and I'm perhaps more isolated in that way because I don't have a particularly student facing role. So I really miss seeing students about. I really do, because that reminds me of exactly why I came into student services in the first place. And I would say, I don't want to be really negative, but this has probably been the most challenging year of my 30 years in higher education professionally. I think just being able to juggle everything, you know, keep all of our services going so that we can feel proud of what we can offer students, and actually looking after my staff who, like everybody, have had their struggles. And they're also trying to keep, you know, what they do going. I think that's been really tough. That's been mentally really challenging and emotionally draining at times. And I think, like Sarah was saying about your space at home becoming your office and taking that out of your, if you like, your home space, it becomes an office space. It becomes, you know, differently purposed. I found that quite tricky because for me, it's been really hard to switch off. So I've found that I've just worked longer and longer days throughout this whole thing, and it's really hard to not go, I'll just answer that email, or I'll just do that before I finish for the day, or, you know, if I do that now, I won't have to do it tomorrow. And I'm sure we all can, you know, relate to that a bit. And I've found that really hard. And of course, you know, I've got family here as well, so I've got school age child, and I'm trying to support them as well. So I think, you know, it just shows we probably all are experiencing pretty much the same things, I guess, in just slightly different ways.
I think also as well, because we're like it, because of the lockdown that we've been in. Well, we've been in 3, haven't we, over the last 12 months? You know, that sort of, yes, you're at home and you're working, so there's that boundary that's blurred, you know, in terms of that space. But you're also then you haven't got an excuse to stop working because you haven't got events that you're going to in the same way that you would have before. So it's not like you go, right, I've got to stop now because I've got to get home, I've got to do this because then I'm doing X, Y, or Z. That's, you know, so that I think contributes to what you said. I agree with you, Sean. I've ended up with longer and longer days, and I've had to be quite strict recently and go, no, this is the time I get out and I stop, because it's just really not very healthy.
Yeah, I would agree, particularly in terms of work. You know, I've experienced the exact same things. I think students do as well. We've had definitely an uptick of students getting in touch with us later and later into the evening this year, clearly because they're up and functioning later and later. I think a big thing for me that I've missed is actually my commute. As much as many students hate commuting, it was the perfect time for me to switch on and off between work, coming into work to switch on and go into work mode and then switch off on the way home. Whereas now walking upstairs or into the next room doesn't really give me that time.
It dovetails your day, doesn't it? It gives you structure.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, I think a lot of observers of the impact of the pandemic have been, it's really important to try and put structure back into day. I mean, I actually say, this is what I say as advice to students, and I'm not always very good at following it myself. So what I've tried to do on a more positive note is I'm trying to dovetail my day with a walk. So I'm not just doing one walk a day, I'm doing 2 short walks a day, because it doesn't quite replicate the commute, but it gives me that kind of sense of structure, and it gets me off my bum and moving, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I've similar to you, Sean. I've got dogs, so I've got the walk in the morning. I make sure I have a break, and I've started doing a little 5-minute exercise routine in the front room just to get my blood pumping, and I've got one of these cardboard standing desks now to get me out of my seat because I've been struggling with my back because I've been sitting so much. So there are things you can do, aren't there, to make you feel better. Because the other thing I've struggled with is sleep as well. I think, Chris, you were alluding to that when you were talking about students. My sleeping pattern's just gone bananas. You know, I'm awake at 4 a.m, I fall asleep on the sofa, but then I can't get to sleep when I go to bed. It's just really difficult.
Yeah, I think I'm going to move us, because actually Sian started to talk that I agree with the sleep thing and being active, but about something positive in regards to your educational work as a result of COVID. So I think there are lots of negatives we could talk about all day about how COVID has impacted us, but I think there are also hopefully some positives that we could talk about.
I'd say the recording of lectures has been really helpful. If like I've missed out on 10 minutes because my Wi-Fi signal's been bad or something's happened, to be able to go back afterwards and see the recording and see what little bit I missed or what little bit I zoned out of because it had been like 2 hours of lecture, it was really helpful. And I know some courses did do it before COVID, but I really hope like recording them carries on afterwards, because when I've like had a toilet break or something and I feel like I've missed a really important bit of information, and if like lectures were recorded, it'd be so easy to go back afterwards and watch it again and remind myself what we'd done physically in lecture.
Yeah,
There's
I think I
also-
can. Oh,
Continue.
I think we'll stop talking.
There's also more time for independent study, which you wouldn't normally have if you needed to have the commute or the just sitting around doing nothing. You have more reason to do independent study. Ben, that's it.
Yeah, I think I can echo both of those really. I think having pre-recorded lectures that are just an hour long that you could just get done at any time in the day, or as long as it's done before you hit your live lecture, has been really, really useful and really flexible. So this academic year, I've been helping care for my nan who's got dementia, because we were so worried about getting carers in, that for us we kind of wanted to keep care within the family until things settled down, and then obviously it never settled down. So being able to do an hour's recording or listen to half an hour and then think, oh, I've got to go and help with my nan, and then come back to it, has been an absolute blessing this semester. It's been really, really wonderful to kind of have that flexibility. And I think also another positive is I'm a welcome mentor this year, and being part of a team that has been so active in helping other students has definitely helped to kind of keep the positives kind of going in my own life. Just kind of knowing that we're making that positive impact for other people, in kind of like terms of support, and just letting other students know that actually we are all, you know, going through this. So I've found that that's been like really, really a positive thing that's kind of come out of the COVID situation.
I feel like we've connected a bit better with lecturers as well. So like last year, because this is my second year, last year it felt like it was a very professional relationship, and it was like very formal emails, and you didn't really talk much outside of lectures. And now sometimes like we'll get emails just like, hey, how's everyone doing, and we'll kind of do little catch-ups. I mean, on Thursday I've got a catch-up session with one of my lecturers who we haven't seen since last semester because he doesn't really teach any of the modules. It feels like we've got to know each other a bit more personal, and it's not so professional anymore.
Does that make a difference, Charlotte, to how you feel about your studies?
Definitely, because we had a lot of staff that we lost due to COVID. So I lost my personal tutor, which at the beginning of the year was such a worry for me, because it was like, who do I go to talk to about like issues I'm having with my courses? But because we've got this like bit of a nicer relationship and we all talk a bit nicer and it's not so professional, I feel like I can talk to any of my lecturers about what's going on, even in my other courses. Whereas before it's like, oh, I can't talk to this lecturer about this course because they're not teaching it to me.
Yeah. I think that's probably, I'd echo that from the point of view of being on the other side of that, of teaching, is that I feel like weirdly more connected to a lot of my students on the foundation year, because, you know, I don't know, my dog interrupts, well, I've got 2 dogs, but they interrupt when I'm teaching, or somebody's child will interrupt, so we'll all say hello and wave at students' children's and things. And I think, Alex, when you were talking about the flexibility that online gives you, I think that's been really great for students I've spoken to. It's meant that if they can't actually get to the Zoom because they're teaching their kids, trying to get their kids' education sorted, they can catch up with Moodle activities that we've put online for them, so they're not missing out as much as they would have if it was just an on-campus session that you had to be there for. I think one of the positive things for me is I've realised I'm actually more technically proficient than I thought I was. I didn't realise that I'd got these skills, and that I've actually enjoyed sort of learning about different activities on Moodle that I can provide for students. Through trying to support students to work together online, I've learned how to use something called OneNote. I don't know if anybody here uses that, but it was a revelation to me when I was chatting to a previous foundation year student. So I got him in to talk to new foundation year students, and they're all like, "Oh my God, this is brilliant!" So that's been really, really great, just sharing all the things that we've learned between us. And I think that kind of leads into thinking about and benefiting from having to think about new ways to work with colleagues and students. And I really hope that, when we come back to mixed mode delivery and then, majority on campus delivery, that we can keep some of those things like the recording of lectures and putting Moodle resources up for students so that they don't miss out if they can't get to it. Because we know we've got a lot of students who've got extra responsibilities at Newman, carers, parents, are trying to work as well to support themselves. So I think that we need to keep those things really that we've learned, that work well for people and help them.
I would agree so much with everything that everyone said. I think for me as well, the benefits to disabled students who, particularly around the recorded lectures, this is something that Sarah, I'm sure, knows I'm quite passionate about, and so I see that as a real step forward in the way that we, deliver our teaching, and I'm so pleased about that, because we know we get feedback all the time from disabled students. I'm not saying that this suits everybody, because clearly, unfortunately, there are some people who really struggle with this delivery too. But I think for the majority of students, certainly the ones that have given feedback to all of my colleagues in student support, this has been a real breakthrough for them, because it's so much more accessible, because they can go back and revisit content that they, because of mental health issues, focus, any of the things that we all experience, they've been able to go back and they feel like they haven't missed something, and that they feel more positive about the sessions. So I think I would really strongly echo that, and I hope that we can keep that. And I think from the student support perspective, my own department, I've been absolutely blown away by how people in my team have embraced remote working. It's to pivot from completely on-campus delivery and somewhat old-fashioned everything based on paper, which again is a bit of a bugbear of mine, which Sarah also knows about, but to go from that to like actually having to upskill and deliver differently and record things differently, and that's been brilliant. And my staff have thrown themselves into that, some more than others. Some have been a bit kind of, this is scary, in the same way that students have found it scary. But it's been amazing, and I've learned things that I didn't know before. Zoom, who knew? And sort of having to use things like Panopto, which as a non-teaching member of staff is not something I was very familiar with, and so I've got into that. And I think there's some really great benefits to this period, and like everyone said, I think we need to make sure we keep hold of that going forward.
Brilliant, thank you. If you can see me on the video moving around, I've got a cat on my lap that I'm trying to keep quiet. We're talking about distractions and seeing people come in. You may hear a cat at some point. Okay, thank you, everyone. So for the next 4 or so, I say questions or prompts, they're more like statements. And alongside just asking you guys for your views on things, we've thrown a few statements in that we'd kind of like you just to say if you strongly agree, don't really have an opinion on, disagree, or strongly disagree with the statement. And then kind of just have a discussion around the reasons why. maybe a little bit of controversy, a little bit of different opinions on things. So the first statement, and we're going to go straight in with potentially controversial, is government support has been poor for students in higher education.
1000% agree.
Yeah, like strongly agree in the strongest potential way I could ever possibly agree with this.
So do you want to go into detail of why, guys, where you think the failings have been?
I think, like, where haven't they been? Not only have students been underrepresented throughout this pandemic, we've been blamed. You know, we've had things like Eat Out to Help Out, which really contributed to the rise in numbers. And then the rise in numbers was blamed entirely on university students going back to uni. And it's like, yeah, okay, I understand having that amount of people move around the country in one go is going to increase cases. I'm not saying it's not down to that movement, but it wasn't the only thing situationally that contributed to that sudden rise in cases. And as students who have been so underrepresented, it was so demoralizing to be blamed for the rising cases when all we want is to get the education that we're paying for, and that we quite frankly deserve to have. So that would be my very strong opinion on it.
I think to back you up on that as well, I know when students moved back into, when people were moving into halls and the government were like, yeah, go, it's fine. People were so quick online, especially on Facebook, to like share videos of like, look at all these students out partying, but they wouldn't share the photos of post-it notes on windows saying, I'm struggling, you know, the post-it notes talking to other like other accommodations across like city streets and everything, and they're so quick to criticize students because you get a few people who ruin it for the rest of us, a few people who will go out party when the majority of us are probably sat in our room stressing over lectures. I know myself, I've cried a few times over lectures because it's been a struggle. But no one wants to talk about that.
I do.
Well, government wise anyway.
Government wise, absolutely.
And then when you ask them, when there's been petitions to be like, hey, you're charging us way too much for a service we don't get, they're like, well, it's down to the university to do something about that. But you could force them to do it. Government have the power to help them and say, look, you have to do this for students, but they won't because they want the money.
I think
many students are paying for accommodation which they're not even being in there for. I think in our halls there's about 8 people total, but there's the entire rest of the building is just empty, and they're paying for essentially nothing, and they're not getting any kind of refund or any service provided for them to kind of reimburse for them for that financial problems. Words are difficult.
I think my favourite analogy that me and my dad had kind of made up was like, it's like having a mortgage on a house but only getting to live in one room. So it's like you're paying for this full big house with all the kitchen, but you just get to live in one little bedroom, and it's like, it's just not worth it.
I think it's interesting at Newman, especially because the majority of our students commute. So I think a lot of students at Newman won't even be aware of that kind of struggle. I mean, like, I live at home with my wife, a 15-20 minute drive away from campus, but quite a few of my friends live on campus. So, you know, that's made me more aware of the isolation that students that are still living in halls are going through. You know, students that didn't, for whatever reason, or couldn't go home at Christmas are now still in halls, unable to go home. And that must be so isolating. Especially when you think about things like support bubbles, because when you're living half of the way across the country, who on earth are you going to support bubble with? You know, you've got other students on campus, yeah, that's fine. Do you know them? Possibly not. And yeah, you've got that shared experience, but where is your support? Who is your support? You know, it's great having these things like support bubbles, but if you can't utilize them, it's not going to work, is it? And I think no one's really taken that into consideration, or it from a student perspective it definitely feels that way?
I mean, I know last year I was in accommodation and I lived with 3 other girls. I didn't know any of them. We weren't friends. So that felt isolating enough as it was when I went home every weekend. So I don't know how I would have survived this year if I'd gone into accommodation, lived with 3 other girls who didn't really want to talk to me, and then not have the option to go home and see my family.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year I was meant to have 2 roommates, but they both left within the first week of arriving. So I was kind of just on my own, just being there, no one to talk to outside of my societies and my friends that I had already made, but that was all virtual. So, yeah.
Thank you, guys. I'm going to lean over towards the staff now, and let Sian and Sarah throw in their 2 pence as well.
I would just jump in and say I hope there's going to be some better news regarding the rent situation coming soon. There certainly has been money recently released from the government to try and address some of these issues. So that's something that, you know, I'm hoping there will be some announcements about soon. So that's maybe a small positive, but I think, you know, all the points you've raised from a student perspective, I absolutely agree with. I think it's been at best a mixed picture. I think in the same way that students feel that the government haven't listened to their voices and they've portrayed students as, the partying and or kind of the opposite. Sometimes they have actually portrayed students as being trapped by their universities and the universities don't care. And I think it's been a very negative picture if you look at that, always round. And that frustrates me because I know that universities, they might not have always got it right, but actually there's been some really good things that have been done for students and our communities. And I don't think the government has really recognised the diversity of universities in this country. Newman, as you've absolutely said, Alex, you were making the point that it's a strongly commuter university, and that's exactly the case. That that's not being recognised really by government in all of this. A lot of the initiatives have been about what you might call more traditional, or Russell Group universities, and they've not really been listening to the full, strength of the voices from a wide range of universities. And they've not been listening to the staff either, who really know how to support students and how to work with our students. And I think that's, I think that's been a source of frustration for many of us.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything anyone has said. I would say that that statement about governmental support has been poor for students in HE, I would agree with it. But I suppose for me, it's about, I get this feeling that students have kind of been forgotten about in one sense. And then when they have been remembered, they've been characterised as a particular thing, as Sian and Alex and others have already said. There's been little mention about help for HE students in national briefings. We've not been visible in that sense. As Alex and Sian have said, little consideration for commuter students using public transport and all of that kind of thing, and the issues that have been around sort of travelling in enclosed spaces. The other thing for me, I think that we don't seem to hear much about is, and I think Charlotte, you were talking about this earlier, where a lot of students are working in hospitality, leisure to support themselves, because let's face it, the maintenance loan isn't enough for people to survive on. And so they've been hit and lost job. My son's at university. He's lost his job working in retail, because that he was on a 0 hours contract and they've just said, no, go away. So I think that's kind of like a hidden thing that's not really being talked about, that's affecting a lot of students as well. Notwithstanding those things about, your expectation when you start uni, this sort of the social experience of it, and that not really sort of living up to its potential in a way. And I mean, Sian's right, there has been some more funding made available by the government. I mean, I think Newman's in the process of surveying students to find out what COVID related hardship they're currently in. So if you get that email, make sure you complete it. But you know, to my mind, that's too little too late. We should have been doing that in September, actually August, thinking about and assessing what situations current students are in, and then thinking about, well, what situations are students likely to be facing, and then having that pot of money for universities to be able to distribute, because let's face it, we know our students better than the government does, but trusting us with some money right at the beginning of the academic year would have been a much better situation. It's almost like it's reactive rather than proactive, and it's hugely frustrating for those of us who want to support students, you know, as best we can.
I think that
sorry about that.
No, you know what you was just saying there about the mistrust of universities. I think, you know, that's the real negative for me. I think it's not recognising, as you say, that we are the experts in what we do, not the government. So
I mean, I would agree. I would agree, particularly with the reactive and proactive approach. I think what you were alluding to there, Sarah, at the start of the academic year, I think when I think back, the government was still riding high on Eat Out to help out, and it was kind of very reactive of, now it's students' fault. Now that we're in September and October, now it's students' fault.
Of course, students are going to take the 50% off. We've got no money. It's easier for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
and students going back to uni, that is something the government could have made a decision on and said it's either phased, or we're going to be 100% online learning and we'll, you know, subsidise it for a year or something. That's a further question, I think, isn't it? But there just doesn't seem to be much, notwithstanding the fact it's a pandemic and it's uncertain, but there doesn't seem to be much forethought about what's likely, you know, what is it likely that students will be experiencing, and how can we proactively try to mitigate for those experiences.
So they just waited for there to be a problem before putting a solution in that could have stopped the problem in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree. I think trial and error is what I'd leave this statement on. The next one, as Sarah has alluded to, is the next statement is, I have felt supported by the university during the pandemic. And I will open that to the floor again.
I personally would strongly agree with this. I think last year, towards the end of May, myself and my wife contracted COVID because my wife worked in an assisted living home, and it ended up going around there towards the end of May. And the university was nothing but supportive, you know, with extensions and then mitigating circumstances, and lecturers, you know, once I'd made them aware, saying, look, don't even bother even thinking about uni work, get better first. And then again, coming into this year, having like the welcome mentors and the amount of effort and support that I have seen staff go through to provide support for students has just been incredible. And I think being in a bit of a unique situation with having quite a close relationship with my line manager has kind of allowed me to appreciate a lot more the kind of hardships that staff have gone through to provide that support, because obviously, you know, they're at home working 13-14 hour days now, and that's become a norm, and a lot of staff have left higher education because it's not the setting that they came into to work in. So the pressures on them to provide support, and the fact that the support is still being offered, I think is incredible. Newman especially, there's now 30 laptops in the library that can be loaned for the whole academic year rather than just a few hours. The fact that they did the grant for better Wi-Fi, I think was incredible when that went out. I myself benefited from a grant that went out last year because I lost my job due to the pandemic. I was on a 0-hour contract working in residential care homes, and when I contracted COVID, they basically turned around and said, you're not safe to work because your partner works on the front line as well. We don't want you anymore. So I kind of lost my job for that reason. So yeah, I think I would definitely agree that I have felt supported by the university throughout the pandemic. The support is definitely there for students who are made aware of it. I think maybe the only downside would be that not every student is aware of the support that Newman offers, and I think that's really sad, to be honest. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you, Alex.
I'd say I agree to an extent. Unfortunately, we went down from 12 staff to I think 3 back in August. And ever since we started back in September, I've been bothering everyone, like, when am I going to get my personal tutor? When am I going to get my personal tutor? And no one can give me an answer. No one will say anything to me. They're just like, oh, it's coming. Eventually it will be there. And it's like, but when? You know, like, this is second year going to third, no idea when we're going to have this. And I think that was one decision that no one took the students' opinion into account when all this staff was removed or left. I think students were kind of left in the dust for that bit. I mean, expecting 3 people to do the job of 12 is unrealistic. And I took on the job of course rep for my course, which unfortunately left my tutor saying in lessons, oh, if you've got any issues, email Charlotte because she's your course rep. So then I was getting bombarded with emails about, can you change this on Moodle? Can you change the lectures? Can you change the timetable? Can you change this? The brief period where we were actually going to like lectures where you had set weeks, it was, can you move me on to the week with your friends? And it was like, I have no power to do any of this. And it became a lot of work for me. And I don't think it was fair of tutors to say, go email your course rep, because I can't solve most of these problems. As far as I'm aware, course reps are there for if you struggle to get into contact with your tutor, or if it's stuff tutors can't do. And I think people being students saw, well, she's a student too, so she'll be up at 7 o'clock on the night to answer my email. And if she doesn't answer, I'll email again at 8 in the morning. And I think there was a loss of consideration for the effect on me. And like, personally, next year I won't be a course rep again. I'm going to drop the role because it was way too much for me to deal with.
Thank you, Charlotte. Scott, Sean.
On a slightly different note, on a more positive note, we do have, well, I'm on a bit in my society because I am a committee member of it, but we do have more of a support system in place. We do try to set some time aside for the members of our society. We implemented a second day where we have society meetings just to meet up, keep contact, and make sure that everyone is kind of okay before we go into our usual activities. And again, just from personal experience, I think this has been effective. It's helped people kind of get rid of the loneliness, get rid of the isolation, and it's helped us become better friends. And it's, I think more societies and more people should look into societies so that they can get that kind of help and just be, I guess, happier and closer and have someone to talk to about whatever issue they may have.
Yeah, I think I can echo that from the society side. I mean, Christian Union ended up being on Zoom for 12 hours a couple of weeks ago, just because we needed that space to kind of sit. No, you see, you're pulling a face. It wasn't even like that. One of us got really drunk and then the rest of us just like found it hilarious and couldn't leave because it was too funny. So, but we kind of switched between informal meetings and Bible study. So every other week we know we've got that space to come, offload, just kind of chill. We all like sit there on Zoom cooking dinner and just chatting about absolute nonsense. And I think societies have really provided quite a safe space for students to not be alone this year. So I think I would kind of echo that, Scott. I think that's a really good point.
I'd say me too as well. I don't even do history, and I joined the History Society with one of my friends who started this year. It has been hilarious. The group chat's been fun. And when we first hit lockdown at the end of last year, I'd started a Facebook group chat with a bunch of people from Newman on. That's been fun. It's kind of died down a bit more now that we're like into the swing of things. But at the end of last year, when there wasn't really much going on over the summer, it was really fun. Everyone really got on, and it's been great.
Sean, Sarah, do you guys want to comment from your perspectives, I suppose?
Yeah, go on, Sean.
No, you go first. Yeah.
I do think that the universities recognise the difficulties of the context of the pandemic. I mean, as members of staff, we've been given sort of additional days leaves to recognise that we've all been working really, really hard, and that everyone is actually just exhausted because of the demands. Not just that initial switch that we had in March, you know, going from sort of being physically on campus to now trying to do everything online, but then, you know, trying to a lot of times retrain ourselves in our own sort of approaches to teaching for me as a teaching member of staff, which really hasn't given me much time to just have off work, because you know, I've been trying to think about, well, how am I going to do this in this academic year, and you know, the difficulties that students talk about in terms of, I don't know, being a parent or a carer or those kinds of things. You know, we've got those difficulties as well, so we've got those same pressures in terms of trying to turn assessment deadlines, you know, get feedback to students within 3 weeks and all of that kind of thing, which, whilst you know, the no disadvantage policy I think is a great initiative, and I'm really glad that we've had that, but that's put an additional pressure on us as staff to make sure we can get the feedback back to students in a timely manner, and we have to get the results and everything ready, which is you know, it's already quite a stressful time of year ordinarily, and that's kind of compounded, I think. But I do think that the university has I do feel supported by them.
Yeah, I suppose this is a tricky one for me to reflect on, because of course I'm a line manager, and so it's my job to make sure that my staff feel supported, and I guess you'd have to ask them what they feel. I hope they would say that, you know, they do feel supported. And like Sarah, some of the initiatives that you know, the management of the university have put in place have been to try really hard to recognise the fact that staff have, you know, we all have the same difficulties. Nobody's exempt from you know, having to juggle things or to do lots of problem solving in a short space of time that they wouldn't have had normally. And whilst I have said, you know, there have been some real positives from that, it is really hard, you know, and you know, we are I think no matter what your role is at Newman, you'd probably say you're absolutely exhausted, because I know I am at times. I think by the time I got to Christmas, I just wanted to sleep for a month, let alone do anything else. But I think there have been some really good initiatives. And I think when we last surveyed staff, they did feel supported by the university. It'll be interesting to see how, you know, the outcome of the next survey. I really hope that staff still feel that they're, you know, that support, it may have changed and evolved over time because it's had to, but that they still feel that. And certainly I can say, you know, as a line manager, I really, really try and encourage, and, you know, I'm proactive about having those conversations with my staff to check in on them and see if they're okay. And I encourage the line managers within my team to do, of course, the same. So who knows? I'll find out soon, I guess. But I'm hoping that everyone does feel supported. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, Sean, when you're sort of from your line manager point of view, that's been my experience of being line managed, in that, you know, whenever we're in a meeting, a team meeting, or if I have a one-to-one, the first sort of 10 minutes is about, so how is everybody? You know, what's going on, to try, and that also helps sort of just with your relationship with each other in your team, doesn't it? As well as sort of just being able to just say, I'm absolutely shattered.
Yes, absolutely.
I apologize, you know.
And have a whinge. I mean, I always say, come on, just let it out, have a go, you know, whatever you want to do. And I think for me as well, even though obviously I'm very aware of my professional role, like we were saying about getting to know your students, Sarah, I think I've got to see different bits. I've got to see inside the living rooms, the bedrooms of my staff, wherever they happen to have set up their offices. I've seen their animals, pets, you know, I've seen their lovely children. I've known about a lot of these things sort of at a distance, but now I get to see it all, and actually that makes me feel closer to my staff as well. And they've likewise had to put up with my barking dog and my mad cat and, you know, and all the strange things that happen in my household too.
Brilliant, wonderful, guys. I am looking at time and thinking we've probably got just over 5 minutes left, so I'm going to bump us along a couple of questions because there are a couple I want to get your collective thoughts on. So I'm going to go down to our 9th question that we had planned. What do you think education will look like in September 2021? I know that's a difficult question right now with roadmaps being announced in the last few weeks. And what do you think the long-term effect on education will be from the pandemic?
I think there'll definitely be a bit of a positive technology-wise. So like we said about recording lectures, about tutors being more used to using technology and having other things to use other than PowerPoints will be nice. So I think there is that nice kind of advancement there that I'm looking forward to see how that gets implemented when we are back on campus.
I think it's hard to say because we all thought we'd be back on campus completely normal, September just gone, and we obviously weren't. So I think it's hard to say what education will look like in September. I think I would like to hope that it would be more of a blended or more full-time on campus situation. And I hope that, you know, to echo kind of what Charlotte has said, that things like pre-recorded hours that we can kind of fit around our daily lives outside of Newman can kind of be implemented, and recorded lectures can be kind of a cross-board sort of situation for all students rather than just a couple of courses doing it. I know that working with sometimes recorded lectures, counselling definitely record their lectures to Panopto, even when they're on campus. So I think those would be my hopes, but I don't think anybody could really say one way or the other what it's definitely going to look like.
Yeah, I think you're right there. Alex. I mean, no one really knows what September 2021 will look like, because it will depend on the vaccine rollout and, you know, any variants, and are they you know, resistant to the vaccine and that kind of thing. And there's also the consideration of those people who haven't had the vaccine in that consideration. So, you know, do we have a responsibility to maintain distancing measures, you know, to protect those people? I think it's just really, really uncertain. But I agree with both what you're saying in terms of, like, let's not lose the things that have worked really, really well and that students have found really beneficial. And actually at Newman, as staff members, we often talk about students on a full-time course, but they're kind of studying in part-time mode because their parents, carers, we talked about this before, you know, they're working. So what the kind of learning from the pandemic gives us is an opportunity to kind of reshape our offer so that we're enabling those students to access the content if they can't physically get onto the campus. So I think we really, really don't want to lose those things that we've learned. I mean, I'm thinking for my own practice that the way that we'd set up the foundation year is we gave students 3 hours of weekly Moodle activities, and then we discussed those in the Zoom in groups or whatever. And I'm hoping that we can continue some elements of that, because I really do think, and students have said it's really, really helped them when they've had a really difficult week, because they can do it at whatever time is most convenient to them. So for me, it's about just trying to keep those things that have gone well. I don't know. I'm skeptical about whether we'll be back to how we were before the pandemic. Skeptical, but we might be.
I think to add on to that as well, it's been more acceptable to not attend live lectures, and I hope that's something that's like kept next year. So like a lot of students this year, it's been more acceptable to kind of email and say, hey, I'm struggling with my mental health, I'm just not up for it today, I can't get in the headspace, and not turn up to a Zoom lecture, and you've not been shamed so much for it, for not being there. Whereas I know last year, like, attendance was a very big thing. It was like, why aren't you there? Where were you? If you were in the lecture, you would have known this information. So I hope next year that's something that's kept as well, to be able to email and say, look, I'm just not in the headspace today, I'm struggling, I'm not going to attend, and it stay as something that's okay to do.
Yeah, and I think that's the advantage of the online environment, is that it, you know, you don't have to physically attend something, but you can still be engaging in your studies. And so, you know, you can use sort of somebody doing an online activity as a kind of indicator that, oh, okay, so they are engaging, they are doing their studies. And I agree with you, Charlotte, we should try to find a way that's quite nuanced in terms of thinking about how students are engaging in their study, for when we go forward. Yeah.
I think
yeah, sorry, you go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, if all lectures were recorded, I don't see how that would be an impossible task.
Yeah, I think there has traditionally been a fear, and Sarah again is well aware of this, as she is, as we're both involved in student engagement, you know, initiatives, that attendance equates purely to engagement, and actually, as Sarah said, engagement is much more varied and nuanced. And so I think I would agree, Alex. I think it would be great if we could record lectures, and hopefully the university community would see that wouldn't lead to necessarily a drop in engagement, and actually it could improve it. That's what I would hope we could see from this going forward. And I think certainly from my point of view, in student support services, we found that in most of our services, offering remote appointments has been incredibly popular. So not only has the take-up of appointments been really high, but actually we haven't had as many DNAs, you know, people not attending at the last minute, or indeed late, you know, last minute cancellations, because it's been more convenient for students to access support in that way. It's worked incredibly well with certain services. We've been busier than we ever have been, you know, because of that. And some services not so much, but, you know, so for example, students haven't come forward as much for counselling remotely. They've not liked that as much. Some students get on really, really well with it, but not all. But it is a really varied picture. And so I'm not saying that one size fits all for our services, but what I will definitely be doing is retaining for all of our services an element of remote delivery, because it's worked phenomenally well. And not only that, it's convenient for the staff too, because they can, you know, fit in things in their own lives around remote delivery as well. So it's good for everybody's mental health and well-being, I think.
Yeah, I agree with you, Sean, when you were talking about trying to have a portfolio of activities. That you know, for me, that's about our inclusive practices, really. If we've got a portfolio of things that people can engage in, you're hopefully going to be enabling more people to engage in it, rather than just doing it in one particular way. Yeah,
it's more individualized and personalized, isn't it?
Wonderful, thank you guys. I'm going to throw over to Scott, just if Scott wants to throw any comments in here, and then I'm going to wrap us up.
Currently, all of my bullet points were ticked.
Wonderful, thank you, Scott, and thank you everyone else for your contributions today. I hope this has been an interesting discussion, and I hope those people who are listening or watching along, depending on where you are taking this in from, this has provoked some thinking for you as well about what we all think on COVID, and how people differ actually on our views around COVID. We're not all one collective body with the same thought processes. So thank you for listening, everyone, and we will see you in our next podcast.